These are just some rather random Marvel superheroes Secret Wars issues that I picked up, in part to get yet more Zoid strips. But these ones are just sort of more random. But I like older comics like this because, I mean, A, they take me back, but you also get some nice insights into what the Marvel UK publishing world was like at this point in time. This is very firmly in the mid-80s, as you can probably see on this comic here. And the Secret Wars comics were really interesting for me personally at the time, because I was only just into double digits myself, and the vast majority of these characters I simply didn't know. So these are British-sized comics you could get in newsagents here in the UK at the time. And yeah, you know, Spider-Man I'd kind of heard of, Iron Man I think I'd probably heard of. But a lot of these supporting characters I just didn't know. And the funny thing is that, you know, until films started coming out featuring people like Doctor Doom, the only place you would probably have seen them was in comics or possibly in cartoons. But obviously now they're an awful lot more mainstream than they used to be nearly 40 years ago. But people like me were buying comics like this, which led to them becoming the films that your kids are now watching, so you're welcome. But I thought I'd just take you through some of these just to show you what they look like and, you know, what sort of adverts and stuff they were running. So you can see Doctor Doom's here. That's Magneto, believe it or not. Fantastic Four, see the Thing there, Captain America, Hawkeye, Spider-Man, Hulk, Thor. Yes, he did used to wear that cap with wings on the side of it. That's what he always used to look like. Never does in the movies, I don't think, does he? But, you know, that's what he looked like. That's the Thor that I grew up with, that I remember. I'm not even sure who that is. Captain Marvel, I think, the early Captain Marvel. Reed Richards, Human Torch, maybe the Wasp, She-Hulk as well. So, you know, all the modern roster of the TV and the sort of movies characters are virtually, you know, a lot of them are well represented on that front cover. So these issues seem to start with this sort of secret artist kind of strip, which it all seems very sort of tongue-in-cheek and sort of slightly random. So I'm not really sure what's going on there, but it's probably the only piece of original strip work in here. Now, Captain Britain, he'll come up again in a moment. So it says, on October 13th, 1976, Legend was born. Now, you could be forgiven for thinking that you've seen this before, because Captain Britain is effectively what Captain Carter was in the Multiverse of Madness, the Doctor Strange film. And so she plays a female Captain America, but she's Captain Britain. But this guy is Captain Britain. And Captain Britain was actually, as I understand it, I believe he was mystical in nature. He wasn't super serum powered. He was actually mystical. So his background is actually slightly different to Captain America's. But he was having sort of a renaissance in the mid-80s here, just having originated in the 70s, relatively late on for Marvel. So that's just an interesting aside into a character you might not have heard of before. And here we have the Secret Wars. So we get a bunch of heroes all thrown together, including the X-Men, I believe, as well. And they are basically up against a group of villains who have been brought to the same place by a very, very powerful guy called the Beyonder. I'm not sure if the Beyonder has featured in the modern Marvel Cinematic Universe to this point, but maybe he might turn up at some point, I don't know. But again, what this did for me as a very sort of young lover of science fiction was introduce me to a whole slew of characters that I just never heard of before. So here's Magneto in his sort of mid-80s stylings. This also features Galactus, all sorts of stuff going on in here. And see, this is Shield. The Shield was a thing back then as well. And of course, you know, black and white was not uncommon. Much cheaper to print in black and white than in colour in those days. We've got Alpha Flight. They turn up in Transformers as well, actually, quite a lot as a supporting strip. So there's a lot of sort of cross pollination. This was a nice thing on this issue. You can become a certified Ghostbuster, which made me smile because I've not long watched Ghostbusters Afterlife. So this was the sort of supporting stuff that you got back in the day before the internet, you got stuff in the comics where you could send off a coupon and maybe a little bit of money, and then you got membership of the fan club for the relevant film or series or whatever. So that was as good as it got back then, really. In this issue, this was another interesting thing, because I got some early Starburst quite recently, which I still haven't looked at. But what I hadn't appreciated was that Starburst, which is a sort of, how do you describe it? It's a magazine about science fiction shows and films and things of that nature. So it's sort of, it was kind of an early pop culture magazine, I guess you would call it, but very much focused on the science fiction and fantasy side of things. But what I hadn't appreciated was that it was actually a Marvel published magazine. And I mean, its logo is still very similar to that even now, nearly 40 years on. I think it's still going. But I just hadn't realised it was, I think originally, I think it became Future Publishing at some point. But originally it appears to have been Marvel. But this is like a little checklist of what was available in the stores at that point. So you've got Transformers, Indiana Jones, Star Wars Return of the Jedi, Conan, Doctor Who, Captain Britain, Spider-Man, Get Along Gang. And Conan going bye-bye apparently as well. A Farewell to Arms by Crom. So it's just, again, it's an interesting insight into what was current in the mid-80s. And as you can see, that was issue 8. Oh, sorry, this was issue 4 rather. It was fortnightly. So you got one every 2 weeks. So these comics became weekly, I think, in this era, because we'll see later on there's an advert in one of them that actually sort of says, about to become weekly for Transformers, for example. So we've got Captain Britain here. This is a full page ad for his upcoming adventures, and he's flying again to a newsagent near you, apparently. So this was in 22nd of June, so this was issue number 5, so that was just the next issue, so a couple of weeks later. Big explosive issue. I've no idea who this guy is on the back here with this suit. I'm not at all familiar with him. There's a lot of exposition there about how stuff works. It's quite funny. It's just a very, very different style of art and storytelling, But again, you see we've got Dr. Doom here striding about the place looking officious as he does. And we've got Magneto kissing somebody. I'm not sure who she is. Janet, apparently, but I don't know who Janet is. But yeah, it's just there's a black cat there as well. But it's all good. It's all just a really, really interesting way of getting a little sort of snapshot into what was going on. It's a rather moth-eaten copy of it, admittedly, but it is what it is. Still fortnightly, number 8. So this is what Galactus looked like. I mean, I don't think Galactus's look has changed vastly over time at all. We've got a Conan game ad on the back then for a TSR game of Conan, which is interesting because that is based in Cambridge. I thought that was an American company, but obviously either it isn't or they had a UK branch. I could have sworn that I'd seen those adverts in American comics as well. There's Reed Richards and Captain America looking concerned. Now this guy, Molecule Man, never heard of him before, but he played a really big role in the Secret Wars storyline, as I recall. That's a sort of backdrop story for Alpha Flight, or the members of Alpha Flight. They seem to be quite big, but again, I've never really heard of them since. I like this one for the Kellogg's Cornflakes ad on the front cover. That was quite funny, because they would look quite different then. Oh, she was a wasp. Looks like Janet was the Wasp then, judging by the uniform. But obviously she looks radically different in the MCU. We've got Xavier here. We've got Aurora there, Storm. She was quite bold in this iteration. There's Wolverine, Cyclops, Rogue. But this was my first introduction to them. This was the styling of them that I remember from when I was little. Big Sasquatch guy. Remember him from the Transformers comic. very, very sort of distinctive. And there's the sort of the Kellogg's competition that you can enter. So that's quite nice as well. That's quite funny. Neptune's trident. Oh, that's Namor there as well with Sue Richards rather. And so now we've gone weekly. So we're 14th of September 85, and Secret Wars is now weekly. And you can see this is the sort of 80s. I don't know what you'd call it. Ident. I'm not sure what the official name for that is on comics, but that's when it changed to well, not the modern style, but the modern for that era style, if you like. If you see what I mean. That's the one I kind of recall growing up, and Transformers would change it from time to time. That's classic. That's classic 80s. That oh darn. Oh, bless them. Simpler times. So it's an interesting mishmash of Fantastic Four and sort of more sort of mainstream Avengers. It's just, I mean, it's just not the sort of. It's not the sort of crossover you get now in the films, because of course the different studios used to own the various different people. But actually thinking about it, so the most recent Doctor Strange film would now prove the exception to that, because of course now it does incorporate Fantastic Four and X-Men into the main MCU universe. So there is that these days. That looks painful. I'm not entirely. Oh yeah, Wasp is not. I don't know if she's particularly known for her regenerative abilities. Let's hope she's got some. Iceman, sweet. Oh, that's actually a standalone Iceman strip. Interesting. I don't recall such a thing. I remember he went up against Thor once. I remember that in standalone Thor show I once had. Don't think I still have it though. I think that was Alpha Flying. So this is an interesting one. So again, this is Transformers is transforming. Haha, see what they did there. And that's going weekly. So somebody at Marvel UK obviously decided. See, that's that ident thing again that I remember. Somebody clearly decided that they were going to flip a switch and make comics go weekly from that point. Now, I don't even know how common that is these days, because I don't pick up comics from newsagents anymore. But I don't know whether or not monthly is actually more common these days than weekly. But anyway, they were going weekly, so I used to ride around on my bike a lot, trying to find comics on a week-to-week basis, if there weren't ones that I was getting, that weren't accumulating for me at the newsagents. But that was just the way you had to do it. There was no other way to do it. There was no online buying of it. That's a very old school Wolverine uniform. But again, I remember that one more than the classic sort of yellow and black one. That was what Wolverine used to wear when I was little. A secret artist. There's supposed to be been a poster in here from the looks of it. Again, Doctor Doom's still there. All sorts of different strips still there, but Alpha Flight's in there as well. 10 Doctor Doom remote control cars to be won. Marvellous. I wonder who that was. So you're supposed to match them up with what they've actually got rather than what is written next to them. Fair dues. You do sort of wonder whether anyone used to actually win those competitions, but anyway, I'm just being cynical now. That's older me talking. So number 18 is Nightcrawler. Assault on Galactus. Pesky Galactus, yes. That's it. Clearly him in front of his hideout at the top there. Typhoo T, Free Jubilee Tram. I wonder which Jubilee that was, because 85, I've no idea which Jubilee that was. Now that's interesting. This has got there's a copyright readout here. Don't know if you'll be able to see that. But it's just saying that Alpha Flight are copyright 1983, Secret Wars is copyright 1984, and all other material copyright 1985, i.e. the year of publishing, which makes sense. Alpha Flight's sibling speeders North Star and Aurora in Cold Hands, Cold Heart. Now this is Venom. or it will be eventually, the Secret Wars was the story in which Spider-Man first got the symbiote. When he was on an alien planet, basically. So he's got his webs back. He's shouting out because I think he discovers it in a lab or something, and it replaces his original uniform, which was battered as a result of the battles they were having with the Beyonder and the villains. And so he adopts this as his uniform whilst he's on this alien planet. And that is the origin of the Venom symbiote. Although I don't think it becomes Venom whilst he's here. But Reed Richards realises it, and the Spider-Man realises that it's an entity rather than just a uniform. And that's when obviously things start kicking off after that. But that is, you often, there is an issue of Secret Wars which looks hilariously overpriced whenever you see it, because even if it's a UK reprint, it is the first appearance of Venom, technically speaking, and so people try and charge an arm and a leg for it, basically. I don't know how justifiable that really is, but, it is what it is, isn't it? There's Iceman again. Okay, cool. And apparently it's also clobbering time. So is that... Yeah, it's another TSR product there. Cool, heroic role-playing game. I remember seeing that a lot, actually. I think that got very heavily advertised during the time, definitely. But again, I wouldn't have known who she was. I'm assuming that's Captain Marvel, but I think I only know that now because of the Wanda series. I'm not sure I would have known who she was before. And so now we're into 86. This is just the last one I was going to show you of these. It's quite a cool cover. You've got Doctor Doom's reflection in his glove there. And there's quite a nice opening splash page as well. And there's Captain Britain again. This is Secret Wars, Origins of Alpha Flight, and Secret Messages, apparently. Now this is interesting. This is an Enchantress. But it's not the Enchantress from Suicide Squad, so I can only assume that it's a sufficiently generic word that they were allowed to have two of them, or perhaps one of them. I guess maybe Marvel gave up on using her, but it's definitely Enchantress. It says it right there. So make of that what you will. I guess there's a potential trademarky sort of issue with using that one there. Yeah, there's Doc Ock. So there's all sorts of, it's a cast, literally like a cast of thousands in here. But this is why the Marvel Cinematic Universe has so much to play with, because, there are shed loads of source material they could go for in the 80s. Oh, and here, actually, this is what I was going to show you from this one, actually. As I was saying that, look, it's a scroll. In fact, it's a super scroll. And this super scroll's got various different people's abilities built into it. And it is obviously about to cause a lot of hassle. But just, again, 40 years ago, the scrolls, you see, nothing, everything old is new, it seems, as Samuel L. Jackson knows all too well. So, that was it for that little sort of voyage down nostalgia memory lane. Just, a few ancient Secret Wars. And, the history of Marvel UK is very, very interesting because it did generate its own material and its own characters, whilst also reprinting a lot of the American stuff. But it's, it's got a lot of history of its own. So I don't think I necessarily know enough about it to give you a massive spiel on it. But I may well try and look at a few other titles that are close to my heart, perhaps, that are Marvel UK rather than being sort of Marvel US. So I'll have a think about that and come back round to them at some point. So cheers for now. Do like and subscribe as ever, and I will catch you for the next one.